Today at the Comfee Mug channel, I am going to show you how to make this Arcane style skin shader using only procedural nodes. I'm going to show you everything for this shader. I'll show you all of the individual textures, then we'll go into the compositing system because there's a little bit of compositing going on over here. We're only going to make this section here and then connect it to this section as well. It's a node jungle, yeah. I'll try to make it very easy for you guys to understand. I'll take my time to show you each individual node and we'll recreate all of this. For the sake of streamlining the whole tutorial process, I re-recorded myself making the Arcane skin shader off stream, but if you want, definitely go check out the recorded VOD, which is free for anyone to watch. The link is in the description below. I want to say a quick but heartfelt thank you to all of my patrons who keep this channel running for me, especially my Elder Mug members. You guys truly do the most for making these videos possible. And speaking of which, all of my Elder Mug and Magic Mug members get this shader and several variations for free. So if you're in one of those tiers, go ahead and download this shader. The link is in the description for you as well. I hope you enjoy. And now, let's dive right into the tutorial. Alright, so as I said before, this skin shader is completely procedural. It reacts to colored light really well, and you can also use it with HDRIs to get pretty much any sort of environment that you'd like. So really versatile shader. It does have some compositing actually going into it, which I will talk about at the end or closer to the end of the video here. This is what it looks like without the compositing. I just disabled the compositor there. Usually have it on always, but I disabled it. So as we're building this shader, we are just going to be looking at the viewport without any sort of compositing. Once again, this is in the HDRI renderer, but I have two sunlights set up, one as the main sunlight and another as the sort of like rim light or bounce light in the viewport rendering. This is how the shader looks. It is heavily topology based, so a lot of this stuff will follow the normals, and I'll show you a little bit more on the way that works. But I do also want to cover the fact that this is in Eevee. Just keep that in mind. You can bake these textures though, so if you want to bake them and use them in cycles, that works as well. And then I do have in the color management tab, I have the view as standard. The samples are at 25, but I don't think it makes much of a difference having it at the default 16. It's just personal preference. And then also you want to make sure that in your system preferences you have Node Wrangler enabled. So just check mark that bad boy and save preferences, and you guys will be all good to go. Now I'm going to show you real quick what the whole shader looks like. We have several different components going on here. So this would be our brush texture right here, which we'll start making first. And then that is all coming into the Voronoi, which is really driving the normals and the color differences and whatnot. And that actually goes into a couple different sections. One is the regular output that actually has all of the color data and whatnot. As well as some rim lighting and what is it called? Not subsurface scattering, artificial subsurface scattering actually. And then the last portion is just the glossiness. It's what gives us that nice reflective sort of look. And with that, I'm not just going to be showing you guys how to recreate this these individual sections, but I'll also be showing you how to make the skin softer. As you can see, I went with a little bit harsher of a tone shift than you would see in the Arcane show. The reason why I did this was just to show you guys how all of the textures kind of flow and mesh together. Really getting or trying to emulate that brush texture look without actually having to go in and texture paint. If you can texture paint, then that's awesome, and you could probably skip the first node group area with the brush texture. But this is a completely procedural shader, so if you don't know how to texture paint or want to save some time, then all you need to do is just build it the way that I've built it and change some parameters based on what your preferences are. I am working on a short film right now, or an animated series I should say, and this is a part of a bigger character. His name is Keltaris, and he is a Praetorian. So keep an eye out for that animation as I continue to release devlogs and the process of me making this whole thing. But with that, let's jump straight into recreating this shader, and we'll break it down into the 4 sections, and we'll just start off by taking a look at this and recreating, almost mirroring what we have over here, so that we're not just doing this all blind. So what I want to start out with are these noise textures here. So I'm actually going to just press Shift-A and type in noise texture. There we go, and we'll bring that up here. And I'm actually going to change the scale to 3 for this one and turn down the roughness. And then I think I had a little bit of distortion. Oh no, actually we're all good with that. So then I'll just duplicate this with Shift D and bring it over on the X-axis, and then we're going to change the scale to 80. And then we'll connect the factor of the first noise into the vector of the second noise texture. And I'll tell you why in a second here, but for now, we're going to select both of these and press Shift D and bring it down on the Y-axis. And what we're doing here is just getting 2 separate versions of this sort of texture here. And we want to have this noise texture as 4D rather than just 3D. So we'll move up and just change that to 4D, and then we'll move it on the W axis, or width, I don't know what it's actually referring to, but we'll move it a little bit on that to 0.5, and then the scale is still good, but we are going to change the distortion to 0.5 as well, and we'll increase the roughness to 0.5 on this noise texture here. Now that's all nice and dandy, but we got to be able to see what we're actually doing here. So what I'll want to do is add a Voronoi texture, bring it right there, and then we'll add a color ramp, put it in between, connect the color of the Voronoi to the factor of the color ramp, and we'll change the black stop's position to 0.4 and the white stop's position to 0.6. With that, I'll also want to go back over to the Voronoi. We'll change this to smooth F1, and we'll actually apply a scale of 35. And now's probably a good time for me to let you guys know that I'm actually using the imperial units system. So if you're using the metric system, then it might be a little bit different scaling, but it'll all end up with a very similar result. I'm not going based on the exact numbers. I just want to get a similar look, an artistic look. That's what we're really going for here. So you can always tweak the different parameters for your own characters based on the look that you're going for. But with that, I'll also just want to press Ctrl T on my Voronoi, and we'll bring that up. And I actually want this to be the object texture coordinate output there for the mapping node. That just makes the Voronoi wrap around the model smoothly, and we'll also connect the mapping node to the vector inputs of both of our first noise textures right here. And once we've done that, we have set ourselves up perfectly to add a mix color node. Bring that up. If you're using earlier versions of Blender, then this would be the mix RGB node. And then we'll just take the factor of each of these last noise textures and plug them into the A and B inputs. Doesn't matter which one they're plugged into. And then we'll take the color output of our color ramp over here that's connected to our Voronoi, and we'll plug it into the factor of our mix color. And actually we'll want to just Shift D, duplicate the color ramp, bring it over on the X-axis, and now we can press Shift Control and then left click to actually see what this is doing on our character. And you can see we got a lot of different squiggles over here. Again, this is wrapping around my model probably differently than it would be wrapping around your model. It doesn't have to look like the exact patterns that you see on here. It just has to look very similar. Just have those different lines, brush strokes, all of that sort of a thing. And what we're trying to do is with the Voronoi texture over here, we're breaking up the 2 different brush textures that are controlling the amounts of brush hairs as well as the scale or distance for all of these brush textures. And we're just mixing between the two based on our color ramp and the Voronoi here through this mix color node. And so what we want to do for this character is we don't want it to be a harsh black color for these darker strokes, because all of this is going to plug into the smoothness of another Voronoi, and anything that is white is usually at the or having a value of 1 is usually at the smoothest that the Voronoi can be, and then if it's black or having a value of 0, then it is the roughest, I guess you could say, that it could be. And we don't want the skin to be too rough, so we'll actually just increase this black color stop to a little bit lighter of a gray. Yeah, that should work there. A value of probably around 0.3. If you're really wanting to be nitpicky, we can do 0.3 there. That should work well. And with that, we have completed the first node group, the brush texture, and we can actually put this in a frame, so we can press Shift P and then press the F2 button on your keyboard and then call this brush texture. And so now we can move on to the second and easiest node group to make, and that's just this Voronoi with the vector transform over here. Cool thing about the vector transform node, you can actually check out my latest tutorial, or my previous tutorial, I should say, before this this one came out. This thing is really awesome. It'll fix a lot of your problems for pretty much all of your shaders. So just go ahead and check out that video. I probably have a card that you can click on. But for now, we're just going to add a Voronoi texture right here. We can bring it just below, and then we'll also do the good old Control-T method to bring up that mapping and texture coordinate node. And then we'll change this actually to normal rather than object. I'll show you the reason why for that in a second here. But before we do that, let's actually change this to smooth F1, and we'll actually reduce the roughness to 0. And we'll change the scale to 3, and the randomness is good, and for the smoothness, we're actually going to plug in that last color ramp from the brush texture directly into the smoothness there. And now if I press Shift Control and then left click a few times, or a couple times, we can actually see what's going on with this texture. Now it is very colorful, it's going all over the place, but you can see how with the different divots of my mesh here, the Voronoi texture is actually following the topology and the normals. And that's why we have it connected to the normals. If we were just to connect it to the object, then we would get a much different result. As you can see, it is not following the mesh at all. It's just going on its own sort of adventure. And so we want it to stay on normals. And you can actually see if I increase the scale, then you'll see where all of those colors are sort of like stretching over the place and culminating in certain areas, or accumulating, I should say, culminating. Wow. And then if we decrease this, the texture begins to become a lot simpler. So you can actually see where certain colors are sort of congregating. So we want to keep this at 3, and that will be good enough for us to get all the details that we would need for the different shading and lighting effects that we're going to add in a second here, without making it too detailed or not detailed enough. What this texture actually really excels at, and what we're actually going to use it for, is the position output. And what that is doing is just influencing the normals, so we're getting those more stylized color shifts instead of just the regular normal shifts that we would get from just the normal output. right? So the Voronoi texture itself is breaking up the normals to get a more stylized result. And if you want a softer look than the harsher skin tone that we have going on here, or skin tone shifts, I could say, then you can just reduce the gray color stop for this color ramp here, and we'll actually get a very similar result, just with a little bit less roughness. And this would be more akin to what you would see in Arcane for the male characters. The female characters are a little bit different because their skin is a little bit softer. So we'll go over how to get that look at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But for now, just so that we can see in a little bit more detail what we're doing here, I am going to keep the gray color stop at 0.4 for now, just to have the contrast between those textures. And actually what I'm realizing is I had the compositor on, so this is what the textures should look like without the compositor. It's just a very subtle difference. As you can see, if I turn it back on, it has a way of blending the textures a little bit differently and a little bit more interestingly to get that stylized look. But without it, you're not losing a whole lot there. It's just a little bit added stylization, which we will go over all of the compositing soon here. So don't worry. But for now, what I want to do is actually we can move this a little bit over so that we're not encroaching upon the rest of these. And so what I want to do now is just add the vector transform node. This is an incredible node here, and we are going to change the convert from to object and change the convert to world. If you want to check out a more detailed tutorial on the way that this node works, then definitely go check out the linked tutorial down below in the description. I recommend you use this node for pretty much all of your shaders. It is just that good. But then we're going to add a diffuse. There we go. And we are going to set that right there and connect the normal, or the vector output of our vector transform, to the normal of our diffuse. And now we can press Shift Control and left click, and we will see exactly what the Voronoi texture and all of the textures that we made is doing to the normals of our diffuse. And this is just the diffuse as is. We'll actually increase the value to 1 there so that it's completely white. And so this is what you will see, or close to what you'll see. It'll depend on the model, but this is the type of texture that you're looking for there. And it has all of the light interaction ability right there, but we're actually going to lose that with the next step. But don't worry, we'll regain it in the step afterwards. So now that we have this going on, we want to start adding a little bit of color, because this is a very pale boy. He's looking like Darth Vader underneath that mask there. But no, so we're actually going to add a shader to RGB node. And this is one of the nodes that is only in Eevee. And so that is the reason why. If you want to just bake the texture itself, the normal, right, then you can just connect it like this and then switch this over to cycles. And well, I have some other modifiers on there that don't work in cycles, but then you'll be able to just bake this texture as is in cycles. You just need to make sure that your model's topology is finished before you bake any of the textures there. You'll also want to make sure that your model is UV unwrapped. There's some great tutorials out there to figure that out, but you'll then be able to bring that baked texture into the Cycles engine. I don't know why that was so hard to say. But anyways, staying in Eevee, we will just connect the shader to RGB node there with Shift Control left click once again. And now let's take a look at the finished shader and see exactly what we're doing over here. I may actually want to just copy and paste some of these and then just tell you guys how to recreate them over there. So I'm just gonna press Shift D and bring these over just so that we can have a visual reference up where we're actually making this. And now, so what we want to do is add a new color ramp. So we'll connect that there. And I'm actually going to show you guys the exact hex code for these colors. You can copy them from on screen, or you can copy them from what I'm telling you here. The black color stop will change to the hex code E2787EFF. I just color picked some of these colors from the actual show in Arcane, so just feel free to take a screenshot of any of the characters' skin tones, make sure it's in a well-lit room, then just color pick from their lighter and darker skin tones. But for the lighter skin tone, we have a hex code of E4AC94FF, and I'm just going to copy and paste that into the white color stop there. But we also want to shift this color stop down to 5.5, and I'm actually going to try to eyeball it and show you guys what this does on the actual skin shader. So we have those two tones. They're both lighter tones, so the shadows will look the same value as the light there. And now we want to change the lighter skin tone to a position of 0.55. Let me see if I can eyeball it here. Oh, I was so close. But that's basically what we're gonna do. 0.55, there we go. And that is just creating a lot more of a stylized tone shift there. And the reason why we have the lighter skin tone and the reason why we have a light skin tone in the shadow area is because I really want to push that sort of subsurface scattering for this character. And I also want to have different tones. Instead of it just being one tone tan, we want to emulate that sort of like light passing through the edges of the skin there and seeing a little bit more saturation of the blood underneath. YouTube, please don't demonetize me. This is an animated character here. But with that, we want to add those shadows back in, right? But before we can do that, we actually want to add a little bit more subsurface scattering. So in order to do that, we will add another mix color there, and we'll connect it right in front of our color ramp, and we'll actually change the B input color to a hex code of 75443FF. And I'll just copy and paste that here. But we don't want to stop with just that, because right now we just made our skin texture look a little bit more bland or like it's in a sunset, and we don't want it to look like that all the time. So what we are going to do is add a Fresnel node. So I'll just move these down for a second here, and we'll add in that Fresnel node here. Fresnel, there we go. And we'll increase the IOR to 1.6 rather than 1.5. Why? It just looked better than the default to me. But now we'll want to add two other color ramps. So we'll go back up here, and we can actually just delete this because we don't need that reference anymore. And we'll just actually duplicate this with Shift D, bring it down on the Y-axis. And a little hack for you guys, if you don't know, you can select the color ramp and just press backspace on your keyboard, and it'll revert it back to how it is supposed to look. And now we can connect the Fresnel node to the factor of our color ramp, and we'll increase the black color stop's position to 0.1, just a little bit more. And let's actually see what this texture is doing. And so what we're getting here is this really nice, soft looking edge lighting going on here. I use this node for some of my previous cell shader edge light highlights going on there, artificial edge light, but we're not going to use it in the same way. Instead, well, first we'll also want to connect the vector output of our vector transform to the normal of our Fresnel node there. And now our Fresnel node has taken on that much more stylized look to it, which is beautiful. We love to see it. But we want to mask out some of these areas. We don't want to have the edge light on all of the edges. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to bring this down just a little bit on the Y-axis, and we're gonna make this color ramp right here and connect it to our new mix color there. So we'll just press Shift D on our color ramp here, bring that up, and then we will change this, we'll actually invert the color ramp. So the white color stop is at the very end, and then the black color stop, I believe I had it at 0.4. Let me double check that. Yes, I did. Fantastic. And with that, we'll also want to make a new mix color node. Plug that in right there. We'll change the B input color to black, or a value of 0, and then we'll actually go up and connect the shader to RGB color output to the factor of our color ramp, and connect the color result to the factor of our new mix color node. And what this is doing is it's actually softening the edges of our Fresnel node here. And you can increase the white color stop to just completely get rid of whatever's in the shadows, so the Fresnel edge only appears on what's in the light. That's up for personal preference if you want that parameter is there. But for now, let me show you how this all integrates back into the main texture, because we're going to take the result of our mix color and plug it directly into the factor of the actually skin tone colored mix color. And now we'll press Shift Control and left click once again to see what has happened to our skin shader. And now you can see, if we move around here, we have a little bit more of those darker edges. It's more like contouring, right? We can see where in those divots of the mesh, we have a little bit of an edge there, just to make the model pop a little bit more at certain angles, right? So before the contouring there, we have just the regular skin shader. It looks nice, right? But with the contouring, you can see how just the divots in the mesh and the different line works and whatnot really begin to show a lot more clearly, which is always very cool. And you can always change this color to a different color if you want, right? We can increase the value there to get a little bit lighter of contouring, right? It's all up to personal preference, but we don't want to jump the gun too soon, because now we want to add back in the actual color data of the light and shadows there. And so in order to do that, all we need to do is just copy our diffuse and shader to RGB node and bring it right over in front of our mix color and connect that to the color of our diffuse. And then we'll see exactly what is going on with the shadows now. And this is a fatal flaw that I forgot in this stream before. And the reason why it looks really weird right now is because, once again, we forgot to plug in our vector transform. So we're just going to plug that into the normal of the diffuse. And now we are getting the correct shading and different edges going on here. Again, this is looking a little bit more rough, a little bit more grainy than we would typically want it, and that's where the compositing comes in. It just smooths some of those things out and gives it a lot more stylization. But we'll keep without it for a little bit until we get to the compositing section. But now we also added back in that colored light interactivity. And just to give you an idea of how good this shader works with colored light, we'll just change this to a much more saturated light here, and just take a look at how that just operates so well with the skin shader. The shader adopts that color fully, and we can also check out the differences between different colored light shifts here. I believe I have two other lighting. There we go. Yeah, different colors, different saturation levels, and if we want, we can move some of these around to see how they kind of like blend together, and we're not getting weird colors going on. This is the exact colors of the two different sunlights, and they're shifting once again really well together. You can also see this work pretty well if we go back to the HDRI shading here, and we can play around with the different HDRIs and see how that kind of just interacts with the skin texture. You see, based on this HDRI right here, it's adopting more of that orange saturated color, and we can rotate that around to see the difference in look there. And so we can change this to several different HDRIs and see how the different colored lighting and shadows works all together, different levels of harshness. This particularly is my favorite of all the different HDRIs. It's much softer and it has more saturated, a little bit more saturated colors. So we get all of that nice color data influencing the more stylized look of our shader. Just cool little informational tips for you guys. But once we just slap this front portion into a frame here with Shift P once again and calling this skin tone, we are just about ready to move on to the final section of our shader, which is the glossiness. But before we do that, now is the perfect time for me to tell you I have free things for you. I'm giving away several custom asset packs from the Comfee Mug shop to 3 people who leave a like on the video, comment something cool, and who are registered as at least a free member on my Patreon page so that I can send you an email with the asset pack of your choice if you do win. The winners of this giveaway are picked at random and their placement determines the value of the asset pack prize. So if you win a single, partial, or full asset pack, I will send you a lovely email telling you that you've won, after which you can tell me which asset pack you would like from my Comfee Mug shop with the proper label, and I will send the zip file directly to your email. So make sure you go enter for a chance to win an awesome asset pack of your choosing before the giveaway ends. More details are linked below, so you can check that out if you have any questions. And now let's get back into the tutorial. All right, so now that we've made all of this and we've done a lot of really good work so far, the last thing that we want to do for the shader itself is add in the glossiness. And so I'm actually going to go over to where I have the glossiness pre-made, and we'll just mirror all of the work that we've done over here. So at any point, you can just see the exact nodes and parameters that we're working with. So to start off, we will add a color ramp. We'll bring that up and we'll actually change the black color stop's position to 0.5. And we'll also want to add a mix color node once again, and we'll set that right there. And then we'll connect the color of our color ramp into the A input of our mix color and change this color, or value I should say, all the way to 1. We'll also want to change the factor to 0.4. And now, of course, we need to add our glossy BSDF. And we'll place that right here. Connect the mix colors result to the roughness. And we'll also want to change the color all the way to a value of 1 once again. We'll then add a shader to RGB over here and just connect the glossy BSDF. And then we'll go ahead and just duplicate our color ramp and mix color with Shift D and bring it over on the X-axis right in front of the shader to RGB. Connect that like so. And then we will decrease the black color stop's position to 0.2. We'll also want to change where the color ramp connects to the mix color to the factor, and then we'll change the A input's color all the way to 0, or having a value of 0. And the B input color, this is where it gets to preferences, and I will tell you about that in a second here, but for now we'll just have it roughly at a value of 0.25. And now that we have that, we're just gonna go ahead and bring this over to our recreation of the shader. We will connect the color of our original Voronoi over here to the factor of the color ramp. This is where that placement is. If you guys need to see that, it's this Voronoi, not this one. And then we also don't want to forget to connect the vector transforms vector output to the normal of our glossy BSDF. And now let's actually just shift control and click on this mix color. And now it's looking a lot like a pencil sketch, if you will. We have all the different hatching going on, and this is exactly what we want out of the glossiness. We don't want the value of this last mix color to be white for a very specific reason, because this isn't just going to be slapped onto our skin texture just as is. This is actually going to influence the factor of another node setup that we will add right below it. So what I want to do right now, we'll zoom in at the very end and I'll add another mix color. You can place this right here. Oh, that works. And we'll actually connect this to the factor of our mix color. We'll also want to connect the shader to RGB, to the A input as the black or the darkest value influences the A input, and the lightest value influences the B input. There we go. And now, just to show you what is exactly going on in this shader, before we add the last part of that glossiness, this is our little glossy color going on here. Yeah, you see it? It's pretty cool. It's got all the different colors, but we don't want it to have all the different colors, but just one of those colors at every given time. We want it to react to the color of the light. So we'll actually move to the back here just to see a little bit of what's going on. And now what we want to do is press Shift A and add an emission shader. We'll also add a shader to RGB, and then we'll duplicate that, bring it down, and add a diffuse. There we go. And we'll connect these like you see on screen there, bring them a little bit further down and to the side. And now we'll add another mix color node. And what this is going to do, let me actually zoom in here so you guys can see a little bit better. What this is going to do is it's going to allow for our emission. Once we change this to color, it's going to allow for our emission, which is connected to the A input, to be influenced by the saturation and color values of the diffuse. Typically, with an emission, all you would get is just white, right? But the diffuse has that color info. So if we combine the two in a color output, then you can see we get the color data, even though it's very subtle, we get the color data with an emission shader. We'll actually want to crank that all the way up so we can see it much better now. There we go, that's what we're looking for. And now we can connect this result to the B input of our final mix color there. And with a shift control and left click, we can see exactly what this last portion of the shader has done in allowing our glossiness to be influenced by the color of the light without it being the regular weird looking soft glossiness that typically has. We want solid colors for this, or solid blocks of color, and that's what the emission actually does. So yeah, that is the shader for the character. For more of a roughed up character, I should say, if you want something a little bit softer, then again, you can soften it by just decreasing the position of the gray color stop for our brush texture, and we'll get something a little bit more, a little bit softer, a little bit more akin to the actual Arcane style going on, because they had a little bit more soft transitions there. But another way you can do this, and this is the way that I actually really like. I'm gonna keep this at 0.4 once again. Another way you can do this is we'll make a little bit of space in between here. We wanna make sure that the vector transform is in front, and now we will search for a mix vector. We'll place that right in between the Voronoi and vector transform. And now we can connect the vector output of our mapping node to the B input of our vector mix. And so now with the factor of our vector mix, we're able to just adjust how little or how much of the depth of stylized texture you actually want. I like it a lot at 0.5, just at its default, and then decreasing the gray color stop slightly to around 0.25. I'm surprised I actually just eyeballed that. And then we'll get a much softer but still stylized look. It's like baby skin, right? Baby Arcane skin. Oh no, H, don't say baby Kane. No, that would be going too far. Inside channel joke, if you guys don't know. Inside joke. And then if we actually apply the compositing, which I'll show you guys next, then you guys can really see how this shader is actually coming together with that softness, right? And the compositing is mixing a couple different Kuwahara filters, as well as a sharpen. I'll show you how to do all of that in a second here. But for now, you can see how that shift with the compositing doesn't change the stylization so much, it just affects the smoothness and the softness of the skin that you have for your character. Once again, I think 0.5 is really great for female characters. For my characters, I like to leave it at the roughest you can go for that battle-worn look. He is a Praetorian after all, the elitist of the elite, and he shows no mercy. But anyways, now that we have this skin shader completely done in the shader editor, we need to add the compositing. And I'm actually going to let Livestream Christian take over for that, because when we made this compositing setup, it kind of blew my chat's mind. One of these nodes in particular blew their minds. And I want you guys to get that authentic experience. So take it away, Livestream Christian. We have a little bit more time to get into the compositing realm. It's not nearly as monstrous as this. It just has a few simple things, some techniques that I've already gone over in previous tutorials, and one new technique that I will show you guys right now. If we go into our view layer properties, we have all of these different things that we can enable for our compositing. Normally, our render layers node for the compositing, and you do have to enable the use node setup when you get into the compositing editor here. But normally you'll just have the image, alpha, and maybe depth outputs, but you won't have mist or position or any of this stuff. You don't really need any of the rest of these outputs, but you do need their innate data for the Cryptomatte here. It is very important to the Arcane skin shader, and I'll show you guys why. If I enable compositing once again, you can see that my character, the way that the Kuwahara filter works is if I zoom out more and more, it will simplify the shader. It will not get all muddled with all of the detail like it would with the compositing disabled. It'll simplify it as I move further out. And then as I move further in, the Kuwahara filter re-enables that detail, but smooths it over and gives it more of the painterly aesthetic. However, without the Cryptomatte, it would just look like, and let me make sure that I have it. So this would be my basic setup. There we go. So this Kuwahara filter setup would usually be my basic setup for a full scene, right? But the unfortunate part to that, and I'll show you here with the viewer, is that you can see that the silhouette of the character gets muddled the further I go out, right? And I have this very exaggerated, but it does affect the silhouette so that the finer details like the eyes aren't actually seen as you move further and further out. So I want to preserve the sharpness of the silhouette of the mesh itself while having the painterly look of the base texture and mesh. And so what we'll need to do in the view layer properties is we'll need to just scroll down here and go into our Cryptomatte section and enable object and material. What this does is it allows you to use the Cryptomatte node. And with this, you can choose between if you want it to identify objects or specific materials or shaders, so that any object with a specific shader will always have a particular compositing setup that's independent from the other compositing, like world compositing and things like that. So you can have different levels of Kuwahara, different levels of sharpness, and even, oh wait, that's the eye compositing. This is the skin compositing. There we go. So levels of sharpness, right? I'm sharpening it, or I'm softening the compositing, or even different effects, right? And it'll just affect that particular material while keeping the other materials or other objects that you don't want this effect to be on staying clear and not having that effect. This is how you can do certain like Spider-Verse effects with the chromatic aberration and things like that if you wanted to do it that way. And so that's just how you isolate the different things. So the major thing that we'll want to do is have the image output from our render layers connected to the image of the Cryptomatte here. right? And we won't use the image output, we'll use the matte output for this, so that any character with this particular skin shader will be able to have this particular compositing style. It's not limited to just individual characters and objects, and you won't have to remake this thing for each character. It's just always going to be there for that material. So we'll go with material, and then we'll press this plus button, and then we'll just select. Oh wait, I think I have to type it in here. Okay. So disabling the inverted hole outline will allow you to pick your actual base shader, right? So now we have this, where I'll get rid of the material again and show you guys what it looks like from the perspective of the Cryptomatte. Just on the matte output, everything will be a black mask basically until you select the material, and then whatever is white is the material that is selected. And you can actually select multiple materials from this. So if I add another cube and give it a completely different shader, you can add that into this specific compositing matte and have multiple different materials within the same matte or mask basically for your compositing setup. It's really versatile, really easy to use there. But this is what it'll look like with the Cryptomatte. We'll just plug that in. It'll be plugged in later, is what it's looking like. So now we can just add our regular Kuwahara filter base, and we want one anisotropic, and then we want to duplicate this and have the other one as classic. And then we'll just plug in the image input from our render layer there. And then we'll just have another mix color, plug the image input of our anisotropic Kuwahara on the A input and the classic to the B input. And then this will be, I think, at like 0.2. And now, right now, this is the result that we're getting, right? It's a little bit blurrier. It's defining a more painterly look, but not too distinct, right? It's still pretty blurry. We can move back down, and what I actually did to sharpen things up a little bit, I had it at 0.1. Okay, so all of this up is these factors and different things are up for variation, and for you guys to adjust it how you will. I'm going to zoom in so that we can see the effects of this more clearly. But we're going to then add a filter node and connect it right there. And this filter node has all sorts of different effects. It starts off at soften, but then it has box sharpen, which is like making it really sharp and pixelated. And then we have diamond sharpen, which makes it less pixelated, but still is pretty sharp. This is what I use. But then it has all of these different modes, which can be used to create really interesting effects. And that's the shadow effect. But we're gonna use a sharpen, and we'll put this at, I believe it's at 0.2. So the difference is without it and with it, it's very subtle, but it does the trick for how we need this to look here. Oh, okay, I was looking at the wrong compositing there. We need the size for the Kuwahara filter to be 4 for both the anisotropic and the classic there. So let me just increase that to 4 here. The reason why I have both the anisotropic and the classic Kuwahara filter is that the anisotropic, it's just giving it that more simplified look, but then the classic gives it like this boxy, canvasy look to it. And we want both to be implemented there. And you can adjust how much of each one you want based on this color ramp here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mix in our Cryptomatte here into a regular mix color there. So we'll just add another mix color, or we can just duplicate this actually. And then we'll connect the matte to the result of our mix color. And what we really want is to have the type of compositing that we want for our skin texture or whatever shader or material we're using to be in the B input, which makes it so that everything else is on a different compositing layer, basically. It's like adding another layer in Photoshop. And so now we can all add a cube again, and I'll bring this behind him. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate our regular Kuwahara filter setup here with Shift Control D to keep its connections. And then we'll connect the result of that to the A input. And now I'm really going to increase the craziness of that compositing, right? So you can see that it's on a completely different layer. And I think that having the inverted hull method actually helps with the sharpness there, but it's on a completely different compositing layer than our actual skin shader is. So you can have all sorts of really cool and really strange effects that shift between one style and another. And we do have a little bit of spilling from our skin texture into the other compositing layer. But what is really good to note is that we've kept the sharpness of the mesh, which is exactly what we needed to accomplish. And now you can get crazy with your bad self if you want to. I like to keep this at like a 5 for the rest of my world compositing and just have this at 0.2 or between 0.2 and 4. So it doesn't have much spilling, but it's going to look a little bit more painterly and a little bit more stylized. The backgrounds will than the actual characters will, which is how you would do the Arcane style or even the anime style in Blender. How you would adapt that all to Blender's system is to have them on different compositing layers, the characters from the background, and give them different compositing styles, slightly different compositing styles, and having the backgrounds being more stylized than characters themselves. And then if you want to add more Cryptomattes, then what you would do is just, let me make sure that I'm adding all of this correctly in, is you would have another Cryptomatte layer. So we'll just Shift Control D and duplicate this and bring it down, right? So you would have another Cryptomatte layer. And you would just add another mix color at the end. So I'm going to give our cube a new material now, and I'm gonna make this a really, really distinct color, and then I will make another cube and disable that there, so it doesn't have a shader. So now what you would do is for this new Cryptomatte thing, if you want a completely different effect than what's on your skin shaders compositing and what's on your regular world compositing, is you would first get rid of the, well, actually I can just delete this and add a new Cryptomatte. That would actually be a lot easier to do, so that I don't have to manually delete all of the shaders that we added to it. So now what you would do is select the new, oh wait, we don't want the cube, we want the material. We would select this shader, this material, and do the same thing that we did over here with how the Cryptomatte is connected, right? But we would add it to, I believe we would add it to this final mix now. So now we're just affecting that one cube's material, and then we can add whatever kind of effect we want that cube to have. And we can actually add a color ramp into here, and we can affect the cube's shading and all of that directly, as well as the color, and give it different shades and things like that. Make it really, really dynamic so that it's just on another layer. And we can increase all of this stuff so that it's on a completely different layer than the world compositing as well. I hope all of that makes sense, but that is all the core elements to how all of this would work. And I hope that it just opens up a lot more possibilities for you guys and your creations there. Thank you so much for watching all the way through my tutorial. Remember to leave a like on the video if you want more tutorials like this. And also, make sure you enter the giveaway before it's too late. I'd love for you to chance to win something for free. But if you want to see a breakdown of the stone shader inspired by Arcane that I have for my Praetorian's armor, then you can check out this video right here.